Welcome to the Universal Dancer podcast with your host Leslie Zare, author of The Alchemy of Dance and the Alchemia Remedies. Coming to you live from Cairo, Egypt, the ancient land of Chem. Journey with us to explore sacred dance, the sacred arts, the mystical and the magical. Join a community of like-minded souls seeking to understand the cosmic dance of co-creation through the sacred arts. Come along and expand your mind, ignite your creativity, and explore something new and something old.
Welcome. Welcome to the podcast. I want to welcome all the viewers to yet another edition. So this is kind of a special edition. This is going to be one that is not with someone who's involved with sacred dance, but other types of sacred arts. So I'm excited about that. Someone that I've been working with, people that I've been working with lately, and I'm very excited about what they're doing. So I'm wanting to share that with you. So without much further ado, let me just get right to it and let me introduce you to our guests. My guests for this episode are Laura Lee and Paul Robear, directors of the Cuyamungue Institute. The Institute was founded in 1978 as the worldwide headquarters to carry forward anthropologist Dr. Felicitas Goodman's work with ecstatic trance postures. Laura and Paul write books, articles, newsletters, and present this work. Venues have included interviews and lectures for the general public and for university classrooms, on-site workshops around the world, a collaborative modern art exhibition showcasing Cuyamungue Institute at the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, and lately online Zoom gatherings. They studied with Dr. Goodman for 10 years before her passing in 2005, have taught since 2000, and have guided and administered the Institute since 2011 with expertise born of media careers. As well as being the president and executive director of the Cuyamungue Institute, Paul's real passion is for felicitating the Ecstatic Trance Posture events, both at the headquarters in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and worldwide via Zoom. Paul has developed a lifelong appreciation of the teachings of wisdom traditions, and following the common threads from traditions from around the world led him to his role at the Institute. He feels that the time has come to recognize the need to bridge these cross-cultural wisdom traditions with the needs of today's world. It is with the direct experience triggering spiritual insights that we can provide practical solutions for modern cultures and technologies. Laura Lee hosted The Laura Lee Show on nationally syndicated radio, while Paul ran a media company, producing and publishing books and videos. It was on Laura Lee's show that she first met Dr. Goodman over the phone for an interview that spanned 3 hours with call-ins. Laura Lee recalls, "I was immediately taken with the idea of psychological archaeology," as Dr. Goodman put it, and experiencing the worldview of our ancestors from the inside out. This was not a human construct or dogma or belief system, all of which I held suspect. Rather, here was the rediscovery of what our collective ancestors, masters of the brain-mind navigation, had found: the innate ability to throw open the doors of perception on the level of the physiology, something the body-mind already knew how to do and need only activation of the on switch through a simple ritual. No outside agents needed. Let us welcome Laura Lee and Paul Robear. Welcome.
It's so good to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. I've enjoyed your work for a very long time, and
enjoy yours. Yeah. So yeah, thank you.
Mutual admiration society. Yes. For those of you who have done events at the center, when the center was open here in Cairo, you may have done some trance postures with us. So now you'll get to hear right from the people who actually know what they're talking about better than I did. So let's jump right in. Maybe you can begin by explaining what Dr. Goodman's work was, what her idea was, and what trance postures are.
Thank you, Leslie. Laura,
Wow, let's see. She contributed so much in terms of finding those avenues that we all have within by saying that mystical states are not for mystics only. We all have the capacity to enter into that, and that it's a normal, natural part of us. We don't need outside agents. Plant medicines work, but so does the physiology through ritual. Find it easy to access what she called an altered state, an alternate reality, and that we are tapping into the eternal now, which is part of that living, conscious universe where our ancestors live, where the animal spirits live, where probably we live between incarnations here, I don't know. So her great gifts to us were, and I interviewed her in radio saying, how do I contact my indigenous ancestors? Where are they? As Westerners, we've been chopped off at the knees for accessing what our true deep history was. Where is it? And she said, look at the artifacts of the earliest artists left us. You can go back 40,000 years and find artifacts, and you can find depictions of postures. That was a clue that she read as ritual instructions. So her great gift to us was to say, we have the same physiology that they did. We can also enter into these states normally, naturally, and easily. The universe is calling to us. It's redundant because there's so many opportunities to enter into altered states. The fact that we do so spontaneously and have mystical experiences. If you've ever had a deep daydream, you are entering into these kinds of states. And our ancestors just knew there was a ritual, there was an ability to focus. She took the well-known ritual, setting aside a sacred space, smudging, preparing yourself, calling the spirits, an essential step to that, and using sonic driving, well-known around the world. To this, she added, let's sit or stand in these postures as depicted in so many artifacts the world over, going back through time.
She said something in one of her books that I thought was really interesting, and I think it's one of the things that kind of drove me to this work. I still don't recall exactly how I found it. We've talked about that often, but it's all a blur somehow. But she mentions in one of her books about ecstasy itself, or the ecstatic state, and how she felt that this is something that human beings are really, that we need.
And we've been deprived.
Yeah. And how she felt that possibly things like addictions, like alcoholism and these things were because people no longer are searching for that other state of consciousness, and instead of possibly doing it in a healthy way, they're using something to medicate themselves. And I think that's really, when you think about that, yes, we need that. We need that joy. We need that ecstasy. And there have to be ways, healthy ways, to actually go into that state. So I thought that was a really interesting point that she made. That really impressed me when I read that in her book.
The poor substitutes aren't the real thing, that right. You can go there direct.
I think she really made a fantastic contribution to the idea that the full spectrum of the human experience is available to us, and that if we're not having one foot in the alternate reality, we're missing out on the full value of what it is to be human. That if you look at our ancestral history, there's always been a relationship between the alternate and the everyday reality, that the ancestors knew and had rituals to connect themselves, to understand their relationship to all of life that surrounded them. The plants, the trees, the animals, the sky, the stars, everything had a relationship. And they took that as an internal process to better themselves as how they survived.
We sometimes think that maybe our early ancestors were naturally in this state of two minds, a foot in this world, a foot in that world. and that we've just lost our way through time, not only the techniques, but naturally being there, and that these rituals were a way to reopen that door.
And if you look at indigenous societies today that still hold on to the traditions of the past, they bring forth that same sort of knowledge still, that idea that we can have a foot in both worlds, that we need to have a respect for this alternate reality, and that it's something that is alive and well and just as real as this reality.
I'm intrigued by the lessons that it delivers, because it seems to say there is so much more to this ordinary reality that we're living in than we seem to think. If we could take our blinders off, we would see a far more interesting and alive and joyous and magnificent universe than this idea of the cold, dead machine running out of energy.
Well, obviously the ancients were tuned into something, but I think we lost that wisdom. But it must have been an intuitive leap or something for her to reconnect to that, because I think to put those pieces together, they do make sense once you put them together, but
how'd she get there?
Yes.
Her body of anthropological work goes way back before the posture discovery, and that's probably what you're going to mention.
Would you like to hear that?
Yes, I would.
She was a linguist. She spoke and wrote 8 languages. She was working as a medical translator. And then she decided to go back to university and get her anthropological degree. And her mentor was Professor Erica Bourguignon, a well-known cultural anthropologist, who started to collect in the 1960s 488 ethnographies from these societies, old and new, to say, well, what is your sacred technique? When you say that you're hearing and seeing visions, is that pathology, or is that the sacred work that you say that it is? And they concluded in 95% of them, yes, it's sacred work, that altered states of consciousness are valid and real and healing. So that was a real turning point in the Western mind to start to look into, accept, and validate altered states of consciousness. And Felicitas was a part of that. She was there translating many of those. And she kept a short list together. What is that ritual that they all share? And so by looking at the essential steps, she said they're all putting aside a sacred space, they're all calling the spirits, they're all using some kind of sonic driving. So that became a key formula. So she was lecturing on this at Denison University by this time, and to her students, and they all said, Dr. Goodman, you're saying that we can get there without drugs? Show us. So she would do these experiments. She wasn't entirely pleased with the results. She thought that there was something missing. They could trip, but it wasn't ecstatic, meaning stepping outside one's normal stasis, normal waking state sufficiently. There was no touching the hem of something larger. So she set it aside until she found the work of V.F. Emerson with looking at yoga states, and he had put some simple measures to it. And he found that, this is the Canadian psychologist, he found that simply sitting or in a yoga posture would change some physiological parameters, motility of the intestines, how do you measure that? And breath rate, galvanic skin response, just easily measured things. And she thought, oh, really, a posture? Well, my goodness, I know that the earliest societies had postures that they memorialized in their artwork. So she pulls down a book, and she loved the hunter-gatherer society. She thought, here's the earliest clues of society. That's where you're going to find the real magic. She'd always had that. She opens a book, she starts leafing through it, and then a figurine arrested her attention. It had that look, that unmistakable look of that inward gaze. And she thought, well, now this little figure standing in such an interesting posture. You don't normally sit or stand like this, but what's he doing? And there was a huge bear in the back of the posture embracing it in this figure. And she said, okay, I won't show the artifact to my students, but this might be ritual instructions in not yoga, but something even earlier. And so she, one by one, had her students hold this. She wouldn't show the artifact. She said, stand like this, drop your mouth open. And then they started to have ecstatic experiences. Then they started to have this true shift of consciousness that she was looking for. So she was off and running.
And it's true. You see those same positions for postures. Yes, that's the word. Across cultures, and it's intriguing. So yes, there has to be more to that than just that they didn't have a creative idea about a different posture. So
well,
yes.
In the case of the bear posture, what we call the bear posture, you find it across 8,000 years of history and every culture on every continent, I think, but Antarctica. If you go back in time, you'll find examples of it. Not always with a bear behind it. No. But this is the other thing that she did. She knew her mythology. And so for her, when she saw a bear, she knew that in those cultures that know bear, he is known as a magnificent master healer. And so when her students had these experiences holding this, what we call bear posture, they would be healing, balancing, a shift, an emotional release, some kind of physiological pain, and then it subsides and then you feel better. Some kind of what she would say, if you look at the broadest parameter in the definition of the ancients healing, that a healing took place. So then she said, well, that's why they put the bear in this artifact. And that's why, it can manifest in many, many ways.
And I think there has to be, again, you've talked about this in the sessions, that there has to be this bigger thing of what does that, because it's almost like a hieroglyph. The fact that it's a consistent posture, there must be significance to a greater significance to what that is on some other level that maybe we don't really understand yet, but it does communicate something. If you see people standing in certain postures, just their body language, it communicates something. So obviously there is this yet to be discovered other layer of what those postures must convey, not just to other people, but to the universe or to the energy around us.
Indeed, and I think Amy Cuddy's work, a very popular TED Talk on this, and her book Presence, in which she says, hey, women, stand like this. She calls it the Wonder Woman pose. Stand like this with your feet apart, and you can power up. You can gain more confidence, and testosterone is up. And they've done lab studies where standing like this in 5 minutes, like the V.F. Emerson, changes some part of your physiology. Power up. You want to go ask for the raise she advises? Go stand like this in ladies' room for 5 minutes, then charge in and tell your boss why you deserve it. And well, we know this as the feathered serpent posture. We see it standing, we see it sitting. And this is also widely found throughout Mesoamerica and Europe and in very ancient times. And we call this the feathered serpent. Goodman named it because it seems to be that you are pulled deep into the underground, into the earth, that you are imbued with energy, and so much so that you shoot up and you burst into an array like a feathered headdress. And so there's mythologies also in Mesoamerica about this, what the feathered serpent does. And she said, we follow that same journey. And that is certainly powering up energetically. And so people feel, I'm dragged deep into the earth, Mother Earth. I feel her heartbeat. I feel the energy. I am like a seedling starting to germinate. I am winding up with all this energy until I burst forth above ground up into the cosmos. So that's powering up energetically. Yeah.
And that's how I first connected to the postures. Was for me, they came spontaneously into choreography. And they just, because that's how I choreograph. I guess I shouldn't say that I'm choreographing. That's how I learned dances from the world beyond, because they just download and then I watch them. And when I was doing that, the Venus posture or the Ishtar posture was the one that came up. And I thought, oh, that's curious. And then I realized that it was, and I'm not sure how I made that connection to you, but that was how it all started for me. So clearly there is either something we're communicating or, yes, something that needs to be, that we need to be the vessel in a certain shape, perhaps like a specific antenna or something. That's always the feeling that I get personally. But yeah,
your body is like an antenna to tune into a frequency. And your idea that these come from the spirits, Goodman tells a story in her book, Where the Spirits Ride the Wind. She tells a lovely story. Sorry, not that book. Yeah. Here it is. She tells a lovely story of a Matsu Genka shaman, Benjamin Sanchez, who was talking with a Swiss anthropologist. And he was asking him, what is this? What do you see when you go in a vision? And so the shaman drew a little picture. And one of these was the bear posture. One of these was what we call singing shaman. Another one was the feathered serpent that we just mentioned. So he drew little stick figures. Do you want to find it in the book? And there were little whiskers on these little figures standing in a village. You could see other things in his drawing. And the anthropologist said, what are these whiskered beings? Oh, those are the spirits. And it looked to her like, yes, the spirits convey this knowledge through the downloads, through the trance state, through spontaneous connections in dreams, that we are truly gifted with these instructions from this other realm, because it facilitates the door being thrown open and the connection happening. And so she cites this as, where do these come from? Well, human beings, if you stripped away all knowledge of this, and much of it has been stripped away, humans would rediscover again and again and again. Why? Because it works, and because the spirits need us, she would say, as much as we need them. Mm-hmm. It's not that we're the lowly human and we're worshiping the spirits and they're the gods. More that there's a reciprocal relationship, and that we are the brothers and sisters in two different realms.
Well, and I think that fits in well with the whole concept of the yuga cycles. Not that that's what she was talking about, but that there is this material and non-material world, and we're moving through these cycles to then flip to the other one. But that also explains why the ancients seem to know how to do this better than we did, or that we lost it somewhere along the line.
We can do it, I think, just as successfully as they, but I think that we've lost what I call the cultural DNA, but we retain the physiological DNA. And so really it's about a matter of the spirits are teaching us as we go. Paul and I are just the facilitators. Any teacher facilitating this ritual, the facilitators, it's really the spirits that come through and teach us. We're trying to accumulate the body, the intellectual, the understanding, the history, the archives, what do you do when your eyes are closed and we're shaking and rattling you? Mm. And we have found kinship with your work, Leslie. You have been so kindly guiding us in these beautiful dances on occasions after we do this. And we find kinship. First of all, we're dancing in our trances so often. People who know nothing about this work can do it so successfully for the first time. And then so often everybody's reporting to us, I was there. I was dancing around a campfire with the spirits, with the ancestors. I knew the steps of the dance, and I'm there. And that's such heartfelt to be fully welcomed by the spirits and to celebrate. So, and then people will ask us, well, should I be moving my body? Well, I think they're two different steps, and that's why you were leading us in the dance afterwards. Goodman would say, no, keep your body still, because that is the antenna has to maintain its integrity to support the physiological shift that happens, that is opening that doorway in the brain, in the mind, in the body. Hold it still, but you're dancing in your energy body, your spirit body, and that's where the dance is taking place. The kiva is within, the dance is within. But we get so instructed to do that I think it's important that we take it out into our ordinary reality and dance as well. And the beauty with which you lead us is about taking the threads of that and expressing it taking spirit through the body and expressing that.
And I think both of these are so important. I hope that a lot of the people that typically watch this podcast or listen to this podcast because they're dancers will try this, because it's a completely different experience. It's one thing to have energy move through you and move the body, and it's something else to just hold that stability and to, yes, allow the energy body to do the dance without you physically moving. I had this experience because in a different way. A few years ago, I think it was 2013, we did a Sacred Sounds Egypt tour with a friend of mine, Dan First. He's a sound person. And at this point, I think it was 2013. It's all a blur now. But anyway, when we did it, we were at a point where we could not do things in the temple, in any of the temples in Egypt. You could not meditate. You could not. He's the sound person, and he's studied all the ancient Egyptian songs, and he wanted to go into the temples and sing and all of this, and we couldn't. We couldn't do any of this. They had kind of made this rule that nobody could do anything in the temples, and he was very frustrated. And to me, it was a challenge. It's like, okay, they've closed a door. That means we need to open another door. So what I did was I told all of the people in the group, I said, this is what we're doing. You're going to dance, but not in your physical body. So I explained what we were going to do. And so basically when we went into the temple, all we did was we stood together. We didn't make a sound. We didn't move. But they had all been instructed as to how they were going to do this dance without physically moving their body. So we did it. We did our work anyway. I saw that challenge as like a way to up my game somehow. He was frustrated, which maybe again is he's working with sound. Maybe it's a whole different thing. But so yeah, I think there's those kind of two extremes if you see them that way, and then there's everything in between. So
integration of the two. I bet it was a pretty powerful experience too.
It was. Your experience is a great example of what Goodman was bringing out. She was saying that there's a power to holding that position and staying on that inward journey. And even though there's that energy of wanting to dance and to go with the rhythm of the sound, that there's something more profound and deeper that can happen. There's like levels, and all of a sudden the doorway opens by allowing yourself to stay in that stillness. So what you experimented with sounds like a fantastic example of that phenomenon.
Well, the other interesting thing is that there are often sounds that are heard over the rattle. And we can only describe this as our set of inner senses are fully on in this trance state. And so we hear celestial voices or songs or chants or whistles or wolves howling or purring or bees, all these interesting sounds over the rattle. And recently people were saying, I'm floating on the waves of the rattle. We heard that. And so
I had that.
Yeah. There seems to be the opportunity for the inner senses. And part of those inner senses very clearly is the kinetic sense, the body, palpable. And the body also, this energy body, to inhabit that is truly to integrate that. And so I think what we've done with you is to dance following is so beautiful, to bring it out, to reach that state of the inner energy body, spirit body, dream body, whatever you want to call it, and those senses, and then to draw that out into our ordinary reality at the end, to truly integrate them, to learn to be in two worlds here as well as there. So
it also ties in with another element of dance, and was as Dr. Goodman went along with the work, she developed a program called the Mass Trance Dance.
So we do dance. Let's we have a dance.
What that requires is that as a community of people coming together, going into this alternate experience through the ecstatic trance posture work, and putting out information, details of experiences. And as the community shares the experiences, a full spectrum of
choreography
comes forward.
There's dance steps that we ask for, that we see in our trance. There's masks.
Relationships between.
There's costumes.
We create
there's
costumes
symbols,
and masks and symbols
artifacts that we create. And so what's fascinating is that we each go in over several trances during the week, because we're also creating these as we go. So we're asking, well, what are the steps of the dance? We have divination postures that are a specialty for ritual. What is this? What is that? And we just innocently put it together. And then Paul, in Felicitas' case during her day, but now with us, we string all these together in what makes sense. Well, I saw this piece of the dance by the Kiva. Well, I saw this piece of the dance over here by the dance court. We actually have a dance court at CI. Well, I saw this over here by the Hall of the Thunderbird. And so we go, okay, sequentially, we put it together, and then we dance it in full costume. And then a story emerges.
And the leopard and the fox dance together, or whatever. There's all these elements kind of come together.
Specificity. And then a storyline emerges that is not from our intellects, it's from the spirits. And speaking of from the spirits, I just wanted to show you this little picture. Do you want to hold that up? You better, longer arms. That little picture is, over here, that one, yeah.
I can't see. I can't see
that. Right there.
Which one?
There.
Which one?
This one, top one. Yeah.
I see.
That is the picture that the Benjamin Sanchez drew for the anthropologist. You see the little figures with the whiskers. Those are 3 of our postures that we use, derived from artifacts, but this shaman saw it as well. So your downloads are most interesting, Leslie. So you're getting them direct. Yeah.
Yes. And there's one more thing I'd like to add to what you just said, because I think it's another facet of the same thing, is I think that when I told them to dance without moving, and possibly with the trance postures as well, I think it's like intoning. And there are people that say that intoning is actually more powerful than like speaking a mantra, because you're holding the energy of whatever that is. So you're not physically releasing the energy, but you're holding it. And that's what I feel when I do the postures, is that, yes, this energy is coming, but then somehow you're really building it to sort of maximum potential, because it's not dissipating into some kind of a movement, which is also interesting. I think it's interesting to have energy move through your body, but it's a different process. For me, the dance is probably healing the physical body, and then that other is, as you said, working with some other dimension. So
I love that we have, and we can use them as needed. Yeah.
Yes, I think it is. It's good to experience all these different things. That was my initial interest in doing the trance postures, was, well, let me try something different. Let me try something where I'm not moving. And in the beginning, it was really difficult for me not to move because of that, because the kind of dance that I do is embodied. But then I remember one day, it was like some kind of a switch just flipped, and I thought, oh, okay, I get this now. And I couldn't even explain what happened, but it was just that point where now I see the difference, and now I see why this is important, or why it's important to me. Maybe it wouldn't be to anybody else, but I think everyone should try it. And hopefully at the end you will explain how people can. But maybe you can just explain what it's like to do a trance. I mean, what it's like. Paul does a lot of ritual, and maybe just what the process is of doing the ecstatic trance postures, because I think it's interesting just how that all comes about and what the steps are, kind of.
Yeah. Thank you, Leslie. I think it's making that transition and setting the stage. So I think, first of all, as it is with dance, there's intention involved. So we set our intention and we let go, because there's so many distractions. In this world we live in today, more than ever, the amount of things that are going on, with our constant beeping of our phones and things going on, and it's an opportunity for us to say, okay, set that aside and set an intention that now this is time for my own sacred experience. With that, then, like Laura mentioned earlier, we want to allow ourselves to purify, to start moving ourselves in that direction. So we burn some kind of herbal fragrance, a smudge, or some kind of incense, or whatever's appropriate. That it helps us with that transition, moving ourselves from the outer to the inner, and also purifying ourselves before we enter the world of spirit. We call the directions, and we all are familiar nowadays with the concept of ourselves at the center and the world that surrounds us. And so we speak of the spirits that surround us. And this is not just some fantasy idea. It feels very real and fundamental to the process that we speak to the spirits, and we say, spirits of the East, come, join us now. We welcome your blessings. Come with us. And we speak to the different directions, up and below and back to center, centering ourselves. We do a little bit of breathing just to allow ourselves that transition of finding that rhythm, opening ourselves up. Then we begin to hold the posture itself. One of the things that Laura mentioned earlier, and I want to step back on again too, and that is that what she wanted to do is to set the stage so that she wasn't leading her students. So she didn't want to show them the bear posture with the bear in the background. And so she wanted to show people how to hold the particular posture, but to allow the innocence of the experience. There's a profound power to that, because us Westerners will start doubting immediately. So yeah, of course you showed me jaguar, so I'm going to have a jaguar experience, or you showed me bear, or whatever the experience, or the cultural thing that you see. So in some ways, it releases the cultural overlay of what the posture represents and allows that experience. And so even though there may be a posture, maybe from Egypt, that brings out experiences that the person's having at traveling through the jungles of the Amazon, that's okay. It's better that they have that innocence of experience and the profound elements to what the physiology and their own particular spirit has available to them in that experience. So when we finish the posture time, then we actually journal, and journaling is ritual. You know, it seems kind of like a Western idea that we have to do a ritual and then actually pick up a piece of paper and pen. But as you look back at the ancient caves, look at the drawings on the cave walls, they were journaling.
Was it the notes from
those are the notes.
Spirit journeys?
Yeah, Laura and I had the great privilege of traveling through France and looking at all the different caves, a dozen or so caves, and it's just so profound. When we finish the journaling, we do sharing. There's a unification that takes place of sharing of the experiences, and that really helps ground us as a community. And so it's interesting with our history at teaching at the Institute, where people travel from around the world prior to COVID and coming together and sitting in a room, and people from all different backgrounds, maybe some with some things in common, and then most people not. And all of a sudden, there's this unification that happens from sharing the trance experience, and it allows us to go more deep. It allows the veil to be lifted for us to go into a more profound state of experience. And then we walk away after dipping ourselves into that experience and drawing that into our everyday lives.
It seems to open the conduits. I'm sure your work is anytime that you're interacting with that realm or the spirits defined as you like. It's a good catch-all term for whatever that is. And seems to open the circuitry so that we see more of that in our everyday life. And the other interesting thing is that we see similar positions, similar postures among different cultures. So some cultures have discovered the same things over and over. So there's many artifacts which we can find the exact same posture, or maybe one sitting, one standing, but the arms are the same, or maybe a few differences from the Americas to Europe to the East to all over the place. So it's very interesting. So it's not that we have one experience necessarily culturally, although sometimes particular cultures come through, but there seem to be all cut of the same piece, a similar kind of journey. But then within the journey, there's so many dialects that spirit speaks, we say, that everyone's journey is individual, but they share some components often. And so a gestural language, symbols, words, seeing visuals, seeing without seeing, just knowing, direct knowing of what you're doing, energetics, colors, animal spirits showing up, ancestors showing up, dancing, journeying, expanding out into the far corners of the universe, being reduced down to a tiny point or dissolving altogether, and then reforming, going out and just hanging out in the void, in stasis, having waves of bliss just roll through you. Toe crowing, waves of bliss. There's just so many different experiences that can happen.
And to touch back on the concept of going into the caves, it was interesting because it was the recent change of storyline from the archaeologists, because in the past it was always said, oh, this is just scenes of hunting.
Hunting magic, sympathetic hunting magic. Yeah.
And now this is the accepted view that this is not a hunting scene. It is one of a trance experience that's being journaled.
Well, and also you're talking about the geometric signs that often show up. We talked about symbols. Mm-hmm. So we had a long discussion on with an anthropologist about entoptic phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And these are the same geometric symbols that show up in visionary states in the laboratory, or the Coso Indians have lots of petroglyphs. They're well noted for these geometrics. Or the San Bushmen to the caves of France. Fully a huge proportion of cave art are geometric symbols, and rock art all over the world. We see them over and over and over again. And you have to ask why. The brain mind scientists will say, well, these are some artifacts of the brain that show up that we can see in altered states. Well, they were seen eons ago by those. It's a confirmation that they were trancing, because you only see these things in trance. They may be artifacts of the brain and the eye and the structure of the eye and on, but they are indicators of someone being deep in trance. And so now a more accepted wisdom of interpretation of those geometric signs in ancient times is notes of the journeys.
And so we find with ourselves and
we see them too.
The participants that the imagery that comes across, and when I say the word journaling, it doesn't have to be lined paper with words in written language. It can be a drawing or a sketch of something that you've seen. Then all of a sudden you go back and show, okay, here's on the side of the pottery that this came from, and you saw the same exact hatch and so the whatever. So lots of connecting points.
Yep. And then you have to ask, what does it all mean? Is it just cosmic TV? We're asked that. No. I mean, it can be for an individual ecstatic trance posture session, sure. Mm-hmm. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Huge wage of endorphins. That alone is worth the price of admission. Lowering of blood pressure. People have talked to us, well, medically, that's not a bad thing to do. You could do this just for that. Like, yeah, but there's so much more involved in this. And sometimes it's an individual lesson. Oh, I got the insight. This is interesting. I feel so much better. I feel at one with the universe. I feel comfortable in my own skin. And sometimes, as you've seen, Leslie, everyone has a piece of one story. And when you put it together, some universal truth is emerging that we have heard through other traditions. They hear it and they've expressed it as well. And we're hearing it again. So we're diving into some font of eternal wisdom, some font of healing, joy, ecstasy, communion, how to be responsible members of the web of life. Well, go walk in the paws of a jaguar. Go walk and see through the eyes of a bird. Go be with one with these animals, and we'll have greater respect for them. And we become better members of the web of life, because we see that all is sacred. All of life is sacred. That's one of its key lessons.
Well, I have to say that one of the things that I really appreciate about the work that you do, one of the many things, is the sacredness, because this is, for me personally, something that's really important. But the ritual that you go through, the sacred space that you hold, journaling as well is a big part of the work. And I think it's interesting because our process is very, very similar about the ritual process, yet we came from completely different places. So I think that that's another confirmation that there is something out there, greater than us, that we're all tapping into, because we're doing this ceremony in a very similar way, having never had experienced each other before that. But I think I agree that the journaling is a huge part of this, because I make my students journal after they dance. It's the way to be your own witness, which ultimately, there's two parts of this. The listening to other people's experiences is really interesting because it often expands your own, or it just makes you see how different other people's perceptions are. They may be seeing the same symbol, or they're holding the same posture and they're having a completely different experience, or it might be very similar to your own. But I think it really expands that. So having that other presence, I think, is interesting, but also witnessing yourself, I think, is important, because we, in the end, are the only ones. The only thing that is unique to us is our perception. We're the only person that's standing where we're standing. So to be able to be your own witness, I think, is also very important. And by journaling, you can do that. You can write down your experience and then go back and look at it later and see what you think about what happened to you. So I think both of those, they're completely different, but I think they both really add to the whole experience, and just to expand your perception or your ideas about what's possible, maybe.
And Goodman would say she was so happy to be one lane in a very wide spectrum of consciousness raising techniques, and that there's so many. It's why it's a beautiful, redundant body of knowledge. You're going to find your way. There's so many avenues to get there. And so the universe is very kind in giving us many, 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 many roads. And it's been interesting for us to see, well, what do we all share? What's common here? Where do we arrive, and how do we go in, and what's the commonality here? And yeah, that all is sacred and alive and conscious is one of those lessons. What do you do, Leslie, when you have this experience and you are face to face with something that is so real, that is so sacred, that instills so much gratitude and grace and sense of oneness in you, that takes your breath away with its majesty and beauty, whatever this force is. And then it has intelligence. It knows you better than you know yourself. And you find commonalities in all the other experiences. So you know that something larger than yourself has come and gifted this small community of people in this state. And it's got lessons for you. Life, death, and rebirth. All is sacred. We are one. We are part of the mind of the whole entire universe. And it says this over and over in so many beautiful ways. And then we come back down to this reality that has a very different worldview. And we're asked, which one is real? How do we merge those together? How do we hold them? I'm very much saying, yeah, science works as we know it, but there's a missing piece here. There's a missing chapter. There's more that goes on. And the universe wants us to know this directly. How can we but help and listen? How can we but help and not want to go there? Because it is such a stunningly beautiful, complete, woken experience. However you're going to get there, so many ways. So what the sages of the ages have been saying, it's saying to us here too. And I believe in your work as well. So it's calling us home.
And I think it's a very exciting time, because I think things are really expanding, and people, in the group that we do the trance postures with, there's a lot of people who are academics or scientists, and it's really interesting that finally we seem to have broken through this wall or this stigma or whatever it is, and to see how beautifully those things come together. And we knew that the ancients did. The ancient Egyptians thought that science and magic were the same thing. So I think we really are coming back to that. And I do think that, again, this, in my mind, it has a lot to do with these cycles that we're in, hopefully, that we are moving to this higher ground, that we can see these commonalities, or we can see these different levels. Because always, as soon as we can accept one thing, then we're going to be able to look, something else is going to open, and we're going to see yet another level of something. And I feel that's happening more quickly. Maybe that's just my own perception, my own desire.
We've kind of crossed over a threshold. We've gone past that tipping point where before what was considered woo-woo is now being researched.
Mainstream.
And it's becoming more mainstream. And really living life without the ultimate reality, that is woo-woo. That is fantasy thinking. That's a sad way to live life. So it's wonderful that, like you say, we're inviting in the academics. We're not afraid to have the tough questions, and we need them. We need them.
Yeah.
As the exploration goes forward, and the respect that they have for it. This, Laura and I attended
for Goodman and for the work.
Yeah. Well, Laura and I also attended the Society for American Archaeology last year, and
year before.
Oh, the year before. Boy, that's right. Before COVID.
We lost a year. Nothing happened last year, so it's okay. You can say that.
So in and it was over 300 presentations, but they always stopped in the very beginning to recognize the indigenous people of the era from where the work came from. The level of awareness and consciousness has risen in the archaeology and the anthropology and all of these different studies of science, that they understand where this really is coming from, and that they need to open their ears up and listen and learn from the ancestors that came before.
And that the validity of the ancestors, and I appreciate you, Leslie, knowing so much, living in Egypt, having studied that culture in depth. It's so beautiful when you come forward, and after we've done an Egyptian posture, and you led us in one beautiful form of segment that we hadn't been doing. So thank you for adding that to our canon. But that you have so much insight that relates directly to the experiences that come forward. People go in this innocently. We don't know Egyptian mythology and lore, but we do an Egyptian posture, and some of that comes up spontaneously. And so we can start to honor the depth of the knowledge and the beauty of the stories and the iconography and the worldview of these ancestors. And I think that I ache for the archaeologists out there who are curating and studying and finding these artifacts. Hey, come and do this and understand them in a whole new way.
And I think there's a whole nother power that unfolds itself. Like if you look at the work of Joseph Campbell in the Hero Journey, and then you look at it from the platform of direct experience, all of a sudden the world really makes sense. All of this intellectual information, but you have the experiential information side by side. Now you've got
deepens both.
Yeah, the power reveals itself.
Deepens both. Yeah.
But again, that's that integration of the masculine and feminine, or the external and internal, which I think is what we're moving into in this age, is to bring those things together. And as you said about the postures, the experiences, if it seems like everybody has a piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. If they would just bring that to the table, if the scientists would bring that to the table, what they know about consciousness, or what they know about whatever, human anatomy, or whatever they can bring, and everybody can share that together, we would move forward so much more quickly. But it's when we get this opposition with people not wanting to acknowledge what others have done, or that their ideas could be valid, then we're just stuck. We're just going to be sitting here, and everybody believing in their own personal thing, and no one moving forward, I think. So, but I think we're at that point. I feel like we've crossed that threshold somehow, that there is much more acceptance, and things are being proven by scientists, and that's important to some people. So it's good to be skeptical too, I think. To just accept everything is not also a good idea.
Right.
Exactly. And that's why the academics that are part of our community are so daring and bring so much to the table. For the archaeologist who is often, anthropologist, archaeologist, often with us, Christine, she'll pull down an artifact from her shelf from Mesoamerica, and she'll say, oh, your experience and what you saw, look at this on this pot. I specialize in the shaman's artifacts, and they are relating it directly. And so we are bridging cultures without much intellectual knowledge, but the academics bring it and build those bridges for us. And we can see, wow, what's going on here?
And what you said, and what you said, Leslie, about isolation of the independent thinking and not realizing the power of the tribe, the power of the group. I mean, that's a transition I think that maybe we're going to have to return to more and more and more. Westerners have become so isolated, not understanding that the real power is in the community and the sharing and I use the term tribe.
And we also say this work is universal because we all have the capacity to do so. I think it takes somebody to say, yes, I'm seeking a doorway to something larger than myself. You must activate it from your end to open this door to this alternate reality. And that's part of showing up for the ritual and taking place. But as Paul said, it's an intention. You need to open up to that. If you go into it and say, well, I know this isn't going to work and I'm just going to go through the motions, then you're fulfilling that prophecy. It takes you to open up and surrender to this greater realm and saying, yeah, I want to come in. But we say it's universal. We all have the capacity, and that it doesn't interfere with any other practices. There's no dogma. There's no belief system, and it's not something you want to do daily, but that it's there. And we call and say it's a multidisciplinary study. It has avenues in folklore and mythology and art history and archaeology, anthropology, cosmology. How do we understand the universe when we're out there hanging out with the celestial beings, when the sun is so much a part of our trances, when we understand Earth, which is a celestial body, we forget, in these deep and interesting ways, when we're traveling through a tunnel, maybe it's a wormhole, and we end up, at the void, and we go, what is this? There seems to be cosmological dimensions to this. We have a cosmologist coming up who's saying, 95% of our universe, we can't see it. We can't detect it. We don't know what it is. It's a grand mystery out there. And so our eyes are tuned to just a very tiny spectrum of it. Our instruments can pick up maybe a little wider of a bandwidth, but maybe we're opening up our bandwidth and really diving in to some other part of what this universe is made up of. Who knows? But so we're asking and calling upon all disciplines to say, talk to us and see what light we can shed on what we're doing here. Because it's raising a red flag and saying, over here, you need to push the boundaries of our worldview, because we're having these experiences, and let's expand it to encompass it. It's showing us where we need to head and further explore.
And I think that there are different things that we need at different times. I remember, I don't know if it was in the summer or when it was, but I wasn't going to come to the session. I don't know. I didn't feel well or something. And then I thought, no, I'm going to go. I'm going to make myself go, for whatever reason, I'm going to do this. And I had such a profound experience directly related to what I was going through. And it turned out to be a healing experience because it was the peace that I needed at that moment in time. So I think that it's really nice that we have all these different modalities, and that to be able to use them in different situations when that will be the best thing to get us the answer or the healing or the next step, and to be able to use that. So it's, I think if we can just open ourselves to this concept that we do have all of these things available to us, and that they will bring us things that we are not even aware of. If we only know that such a small portion about what's in outer space, then obviously we probably know the same amount about what's in our inner space. So we have to imagine that we know nothing. Yes.
And that to navigate this life, we need a well-loaded toolkit. we need a lot of avenues at our disposal at will. Yeah. And that this, you're right, this is such an exciting time to live because we have access to so many of those tools now. So.
And I actually think COVID has had something to do with that, like has brought that to our awareness by creating opportunities, which I hope we'll get to in just a minute. But I wanted to say that I feel that this has kind of brought us full circle to where we started with this concept of what Dr. Goodman said about ecstasy, that this is something that's lacking, because that can give us the motivation. Why should we pursue this? Because people are ailing. If this ecstatic experience is something so fundamental to our being and we're not getting it, then it's just like nutrition. We need the right foods, or we need to get sleep. Well, we need to have some form of ecstatic experience as well. And we need to seek that. First, we need to find that it's important, or acknowledge that it's important. And then we can go and find a way to actually get that. So I think if we can just hold that in our minds, that it is important, and then find the way to get back to that.
It's interesting because so often we feel not only informational downloads, but we feel energy. You can feel honey dripping down on your head. A spirit is pouring a container of something on you, and your cells are absorbing it, and it's healing to just the space between your atoms, or your energy body, or whatever. At the same time, we do see in the lab a huge surge of the beta endorphins that stays elevated for hours after our trance. So we know biochemically the body is responding by saying, yeah, let's deliver that to you. And I think that it is a nourishment. It is part of our sense of well-being that our biochemistry, as well as our soul, takes in. To be held in the arms of the Earth Mother, to feel her heartbeat, to feel that you are accepted, you are loved, you are held, you are protected, you are valued by the spirits in terms of the experiences, is something that I think we're all missing, that we all need. I have a huge deficit of that, and I appreciate that every time that happens to me. I'm like, yes, thank you. Thank you. It was a beautiful mother, but she didn't hold me enough. I'm getting that. I'm able to feel comfortable not only in my own skin, but in the skin of the universe. I feel like it's a friendly, welcoming place that, and that life is more than our society tells us. That is some grand adventure. And this is a sacred trust that we have between this and that realm. And it imbues the life journey with the sacred. This is quite the journey. Let's make the most of it.
Yes, and I think to acknowledge that as well is a way to reconnect with the Mother Earth as well, and which is something that all of that has been neglected, and to feel that being embraced possibly in a journey or a trance, then bring that back to Earth and realize that we need to have that same feeling here on the planet with Mother Earth, and we are connected.
Let's treat her as sacred ground.
Exactly.
Mother, yeah. And I wonder at all the drive now to go colonize Mars and the moon. I'm like, we're here. She deserves us to take better care of her. Yeah.
Yes, and we've done that before. Cultures colonized other places, and that didn't work out very well. I don't think we've worked through the damage that we've done on that level to then think that we're going to go do it someplace else. It's going to be another disaster if we don't work through the damage that we've done this time around.
I say we Westerners were damaged. We were cut off at the knees by the vagaries of history. We were damaged, and now we're visiting that damage upon everything that we touch. Our Earth, other cultures that hey, we'll take your land. and our worldview that we really need to heal and reconnect. We can't go backwards, but we can bring what is so beautiful and valuable and useful from our ancient ancestors forward and put that back in the mix. So.
And I think having that direct experience of something greater than yourself is the way to do that, to realize it isn't just us, that we are connected and we are connected to things that we never even imagined were there. So
it's not just platitudes, it's not just words. When you have that direct experience.
Exactly. You know. Yes. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days with the Zoom calls, with your gatherings, and how people can get in touch with you and connect if they would like to be involved in that.
Thank you, Leslie. Well, we are continuing with our regular Zoom sessions. And what that means, because of the COVID, like you said, there's a flip side to COVID for some of us, that we've been able to thrive in a different way. It gave us a new direction, a new understanding, and gave us a way to reach out to the community of people that maybe would never have the opportunity to fly across the world to come to New Mexico to one of our gatherings or have us come there, kind of thinking. So we've been doing these open sessions now for almost a year. It's coming up in the next 3 or 4 weeks. That will be 1 year. Over Zoom. And we've been every Saturday where we invite people to come have an experience of the posture work. There's no fee to come. It's just an open session. And we do an introductory, about 10, 15 minutes to get people oriented to the practice. But when they sign up, we also give them all the links on the website that are fun to read about. This is a 6-minute video. There's a bunch of information available. And then we share a posture. We go through the full ritual. We share a posture with them and have a direct experience. So we do that every Saturday, and we've continued that, and we will continue that coming up.
This is our altar in the back where we do this.
This is that we
so
make
Paul
our altar
will
mason.
lead the ritual.
Lead the ritual.
That includes the posture.
So that's Saturdays. We also have an advanced, same exact format, but we do an advanced gathering on Wednesdays for people that have been doing the practice for a while. And so
we just skip the intro.
We just don't do as much introduction, and we can go deeper into some of the research on the posture, some of the postures that we wanted to know more about. Maybe there's some postures that we consider that really haven't been tried, that we've only done them in a small group, and now let's see what the experience is for a larger group.
We do art projects. We use some of the props, make props that we see on the artifacts. We do different experimental things there. Yeah.
And then on Sundays we do kind of we call it a question and answer session, where we have a chance to talk about our work, go more into depth about things like we've discussed today, but we also invite in guests. We have guests of parallel research sharing with us their research, and we may have people that come who have never done our work, and that's great. We like to have that fresh perspective. We had a neuroscientist come on just recently. We've had people that have different backgrounds that have joined us. So every Sunday, same time slot as we do on the Saturday. And
Leslie will be joining us on a Sunday in the near future.
Sure, Leslie's been coming in.
On dance.
Anyway, so we just have an ongoing schedule. Leslie, I'm sure you've posted, the website name is hard to spell for people, so it's good for you to put that in the chat.
I'll put it in the link,
Institute. And on the Institute, you can find all the links and information from there. And contact
It's a place name, and it means where the rocks shift. And we think that's rather appropriate. Yeah.
It's a very special piece of land. It's about 500 acres and just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Dr. Goodman bought it in the early 1960s, and we continue to do our work there. People come from around the world prior to COVID, and we have bunkhouses and sleeping quarters, and we dine together.
Very rustic.
We have a kiva, which is the sacred ceremonial site. We also have a huge Thunderbird building that we use for dance and celebration. And
Leslie, you would enjoy the dance hall.
All kinds of
all kinds of
in fact, that the initial funds were donated by a movement therapist.
Yeah, it's true.
And she said, Paul, we must have a place to dance. So that's what Paul
from Egypt.
Oh no, Israel.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, I said
Yeah.
Egypt. You're right.
Yeah.
It is Israel.
So anyway, so lots of fun stuff, lots of fun activities, and we're so excited to expand our repertoire to that you led us in dance, because we dance in the trance. We needed to know more about dance, and so we appreciate that and all that you've added when we do something Egyptian. So it's just been a joy to work with you, Leslie.
And with you. Yes.
Yeah.
And that website you provided.
And then we can brag. Oh yes, there are people from Egypt who join our Zooms. So
From all over. Yeah.
And that website that takes you directly to a great overview of the work, and so it makes it really easy. You've heard it today, but this will give you even more information about the origins of the work and all of that, and preparing yourself to participate.
Yes, and I hope you will participate, because give it a try. It's an interesting experience, and I do think one needs to do it a couple of times. It's not something you just do once and then say, no, this isn't for me, or it is for me, but do it a couple of times and see. It's good to have the experience. And for me, I've always wanted to go to the Institute, but it again is a long journey for me, so it never happened. And then you were online, so that was actually a good thing for me. And I think it is a way for people from around the world to be able to try it out, and then hopefully when we can actually gather together in person, we'll be able to do that as well. So thank you.
Try it a couple of times, because this physiological shift, sometimes it takes the body a couple of times to get it fully going and in gear. Blood pressure drops, pulse rate rises, endorphins are manufactured in the bloodstream. The EEG of beta, waking state, plus theta. It takes the body maybe a couple of times to get all that going, but it knows how to do it. And so you are just awakening a capacity within that maybe you didn't know you had. So
yes, and it's a lovely community of people as well, and the speaker that you have. So I hope people will give it a chance and try it out. Yeah.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you so much. This has been a joy to be on the other side of the microphone. I love it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and for sharing your experiences in the Zoom calls, because I really do think it is something that's profound, and I hope people will join in. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And I will put the link in the show notes so that people can find the website, because it is a bit difficult to spell. So we'll have the link there.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And I look forward to more journeys with you. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay. So that was, I hope you will join. And as I said, I will put the link in the show notes. And I just want to remind you that next time we're going to have Stefan Friedman. He's the author of Dance Wise. That's Sunday, the 21st of March at 6 p.m. Universal Time. And now it's getting a little bit confusing because everybody's starting to change their clocks. So wherever I have that posted, I always have a link for you to check the times. So do check the times, because it does get confusing. And also all the information is on my website, universaldancer.com/podcasts. So you can find that. You can just go to universaldancer.com, and then there's actually a tab that takes you to the podcast. That's the easiest way. So I hope you will join us next. That's in 2 weeks, not quite 2 weeks, soon, when we have Stefan come and talk about his book and about circle dance. So thank you for joining, and I look forward to seeing you here the next time. Okay, bye-bye.